Ooh, that looks tasty. Welcome folks to The Hungry Gamer is back with another mini review, and today we're talking about Survival of the Fattest. And this is a game for 1 to 4 players about being a forest creature trying to get yourself all prepared for the winter and to be the fattest. In other words, get the most points. What you're going to do is every turn you're going to move to one of the 6 different spaces on the map, and you always must move. And I'll also point out one of the spaces is actually on your player board, and that's kind of your stash. And so you'll be using the cards in your hand to do various things. However, before you actually do the actions on the different locations, you get to play trick cards. And each of the different critters has their own supply of different tricks that you can draw and play. For example, we have some right here for the squirrel, like so, and you'll see it tells you what they do on the bottom, and each of the different characters, again, has their own supply of different tricks that they're going to be able to do. However, the core of the game is you are trying to get food to survive your way through the winter, and you're playing over the other 3 seasons. And in between each season, you'll be able to accomplish various recipes that you have claimed as your own. You kind of tucked under the top of your player board, and they're going to be worth X amount of points if you're able to accomplish those. And in between each season, you're going to go through your stash that you have on your board. And your stash, you're going to have to actually take actions to put stuff in your stash. And there's a fun little mechanic here that you can't look at what is in your stash at any time unless you have a trick that allows you to do that. And then you go through and accomplish any of the recipes that you've managed to complete. However, that's just kind of the in-between, because everything else you're doing is, as I said, you're moving to the 5 different locations around the board, and you are taking actions where you can either reserve a new recipe, in other words, you just kind of slide it on the top of your board to be fulfilled in between seasons, or you can just accomplish a recipe right then if you have the cards in your hand. So you discard the cards, and then you take the recipe and you tuck it under the bottom of your board, and it's going to give you a one-time effect or some kind of ongoing power, but at the end of the game, that'll be worth fewer points. So you really have to kind of balance how that works. Other locations allow you to draw cards, look at cards, but the core of the game really is you're going to the 3 different forage locations. And when you go to the forage location, what's going to happen is every player that's there is going to get to play as many of their forage cards as they want. And they have nice little art, foresty art on them, but as you can see, it's really the numbers in the top corners that we're paying attention to here. Because what that's going to do is that's going to give you priority when it comes to the foraging. So what will happen is we'll deal out a bunch of cards that you might want, different types of food, and possibly traps. And whoever had the highest forage number gets to draft first, and so on. Now, I mentioned traps. This is really important. There are traps out there in the foraging, and there's this interesting mechanic that is, if you don't already have a trap, and everybody after you has a trap, you have to take the trap. So it becomes this kind of balance of, well, how many cards do you really want to take? What's going to happen here? How many cards are you going to be playing out? Because the more forage cards you play, that's the more things you get to take, the more cards get revealed, and so on and so on. So it's a very interesting balance, and as you can imagine, traps are going to be worth negative points come the end game. And you're going to play through all the seasons. Again, in between each of the seasons, you're going to get to do a stash phase where you're going to go through your stash and fulfill any recipes that you've reserved at the top of your board. And that's how this game is played. So what do I like about this game? First of all, the art is stunningly great. I love the art. In fact, this is my new favorite guy, Old Grizz. He is so grumpy and so fat, and I love him. And I will say that the version I have also comes with minis, but obviously I'm showing you these, and in just about now, you can see a picture that I found on Board Game Geek of just how good these minis look when they get painted up. They're awesome minis. Fantastic, fantastic minis. So I'm a big fan of that. I also appreciate the theme. I think the theme actually works pretty darn well for what you're doing. You're going to different locations, you're getting food, you're constantly moving around. There's probably not as many traps out there as there are in this game, but whatever, you're avoiding dangers, right? You stash food, like we all know that squirrels, they stash food everywhere, and apparently they can't find most of it ever again, so there's just food hidden everywhere. And I just really enjoy how all that works. I like how friendly and easy this game is to play. I don't know, it takes 6 minutes to actually learn how to play the game, and an hour tops to play. And it's a delightful, sweet, not quite comfy game because you're doing tricks and stuff, but simple, easy to play game that has a little bit of depth because you're really trying to figure out, where do I go next? Is it worth it to me to go and forward a bunch and maybe get traps and lose points? Is it worth it to me to use the cards I have in my hand now to do a recipe from the market, but I get fewer points? Or is it, I really need to do that now and not reserve it for later, because if I reserve it for later, I'm not going to get this really cool ability. So there's some very cool things that you're trying to figure out here and trying to decide what to do, and I think it works well. So what are my quibbles with the game? I only have one, well, I'll say two quibbles. One of them is, it's a very simple game, and that's not bad. However, for someone like myself and our household, it was a little bit lighter than we were actually looking for. And that rolls me into my second quibble with the game. I really think this is a 3 or preferably a 4-player game. Yes, you can play solo, and the solo works fine, and it's, if that's what you want to do. It works. It absolutely works. But at 2-player, there just wasn't a lot of interaction. We found that we were often going to different places, and that makes the drafting not really interesting at all. But if you get 3 or 4 players, then you're pretty much every turn going to be running into at least somebody. And I think that's where this game is going to shine. But as I said, that means even though the game plays 1 to 4, I'm suggesting you really want to play it at 3 to 4 players. But there you have it, folks. That is Survival of the Fattest. It is adorable. Absolutely adorable. I love Old Grizz so much. I like all the animals. They're all very cute and all, but I love Old Grizz so very much. I kind of want to just like get a picture of him and just put him right here on the wall. He's so cool. But there you have it, folks. That is Survival of the Fattest. If you're looking for a simple deck builder, recipe fulfillment game with a little bit of worker placement, then this is one to really check out. I think it's a great option to play with kids. You can teach them, work them through it, and help them kind of learn some of these mechanics. And like I said, it is adorable. It's almost worth it just for the art alone. But there you have it, folks. That is Survival of the Fattest. As always, if you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, share, maybe become a channel member. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.